Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sorry Not Sorry. Today I want to share my reflections and maybe knowledge on a topic that has recently inspired me deeply. Together with my friend, whom I have known for 15 years or even more, we started to delve into who among us took on excessive responsibility in our families and how. And this long conversation inspired me to explore this topic more deeply in today's podcast. I recently actually did a similar episode in Polish, and now I would like to present it to you in English. And it is emotional rescuing. It was mentioned how we often try to rescue our parents when we are still children. When we become rescuers in our life, we turn away from our own lives because this role engages us so energetically and physically that we cannot fully live our own lives. And I received many beautiful messages and comments full of deep understanding of the topic. However, there were also voices of disapproval, questioning how it is possible not to rescue others. And after all, we all want to be rescued. So naturally, we want to rescue others. So, today I would like to focus on the topic of emotional rescuing and excessive childhood responsibility and the consequences it brings into adult life, of course. Firstly, let's answer the question, what is excessive childhood responsibility? It can be summed up in a simple sentence. Wherever a child is not just a child but fulfills another role, there is excessive responsibility. It's over responsibility. Okay, now, what does it mean that a child is not just a child? It means that the child is fulfilling another role in the family than they should. This could be being a caregiver to a parent, a mediator, a judge, messenger, a rescuer, a comforter, a parent to one of the parents, or a siblings. In such a setup, the child very willingly and automatically takes on the role of a rescuer. Okay, now why do children take on excessive responsibility? Mainly because they care deeply about creating the best possible atmosphere at home and ensuring their parents are in good physical and emotional condition. So, when a child senses, even non-verbally, that they need to take on a role other than just being a child, and they instinctively take on that responsibility. Okay, excessive childhood responsibility often arises in dysfunctional homes, such as those affected by alcoholism. And in such a families, children they have to deal with unpredictable situations and various stresses every single day. And we obviously know that alcohol can change the dynamics of the family, effectively adding a new family member that the children have to adapt to, of course. And children also feel excessive responsibility when their parents struggle to make decisions or handle problems. In these homes, children must comfort their parents, manage their emotions, and often, very often, act as mediators during divorces, taking on the burden of maintaining relationships between their parents. And when one of parent is absent, whether physically or psychologically, children often have to fill that void. For instance, if a parent is sick, addicted, or emotionally detached due to trauma, the child steps up to assume the role of the missing caregiver. Excessive childhood responsibility is also evident in families where children are aware of financial issues, intimate matters between parents, or other adult concerns that they shouldn't have to deal with. They absolutely shouldn't. Sometimes children are involved in managing household expenses, filing tax returns, handling mail, or even going to the store to buy alcohol. I remember when I was a child, all it took was a note from a parent saying that a child could buy cigarettes or beer, and that was enough. Times have changed, actually, and that's great. But whenever a child is tasked with responsibilities beyond their capacity, we are talking about excessive childhood responsibility. Children also take on extra responsibility when they look after their siblings. And it's usually the eldest child who takes on the role of caregiver for the younger ones, which is a significant responsibility. These children often feel they must be more than just their parent's child. They must act as a parent and caretaker for their siblings. And there are also children who are extremely quiet, studious, and withdrawn. Is this a sign of excessive responsibility? Absolutely yes. These children understand that they must not take up on too much space or time, staying quiet to avoid upsetting their parents. These children are excessively responsible because they focus on their parents' emotions instead of their own identities, right? They constantly analyze how they should behave to keep their parents in a good mood and maintain harmony at home. In such cases, children can't just think of themselves as a children and fulfill their natural roles. Instead, they are forced to take on responsibilities for their parents' emotions, ensuring they don't feel sad or angry. Excessive childhood responsibility often stems from a parent's inability to provide adequate care. This can be due to unfortunate circumstances, like illness, of course, or prolonged neglect of their own emotional well being. Over time, unresolved trauma or neglect can lead to parents being unable to fully engage in their parental roles, leaving children to fill the gap. Okay, now I wanted to tell you that experts identify four main survival strategies that children adopt in such situations: the family hero, the scapegoat, the mascot or clown, and the lost child. Let's explore each of these strategies that children naturally fall into when faced with excessive responsibility. Now, take a moment to look at yourself and consider if you see any of these survival strategies in your own behavior. Are you the family hero? Okay, the family hero is the child who takes on all the family's problems. This child steps up to tackle everyday challenge, becoming like a little superhero who supports mom, dad, and helps in every difficult situations. This kid often carry a deep sense of guilty and try to compensate for emotional gaps in their parents. They are the ones who save the day, ensuring everything at home runs smoothly, perfectly. And they are definitely incredibly mature for their age. Another survival strategy is the scapegoat. The child, confronted with difficult family dynamics, draws even more trouble to divert attention from their underlying issues at home. For example, if there is alcoholism in the family, the scapegoat might get into fights at school every week or consistently bring home bad grades, for example. This behavior forces parents to focus on these immediate problems, distracting them from the root issues like alcohol abuse. Let's not forget the children who get sick. I said this from my personal experience. In my family, my parents didn't live together daily due to my dad's work. We had a lot of tensions at home caused by a lack of communication. My mom was always fighting to get my dad to spend more time with us because she was already overwhelmed with her responsibilities. So, when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at age 13, I noticed that certain tensions between my parents suddenly disappeared. This is a perfect example of the scapegoat survival strategy, where exactly the child brings a bigger problem into the family system. The illness diverts attention away from the primary issues, such as poor communication between parents, and instead, the focus shifts entirely to the child's health. Just like a child who comes home with fights, bad grades, or school infractions, all of these behaviors serve to distract from deeper problems at home. Suddenly, nobody is focusing on the family's dysfunction, mom's depression, or an emotionally unstable parent. The entire family's attention is on the troublesome or sick child who continually brings problems into the household. Another survival strategy in the realm of over responsible childhood is the mascot or clown. These children try to lighten the mood, masking others' love and providing comfort. They diffuse tensions in various ways, singing, telling outrageous stories, or simply being charismatic. They act as the family mascots, bringing cheer to everyone. The last survival strategy identified by psychologists is the lost child, or the child in the fog. These children escape the stress and difficulties at home by retreating into a world of fantasy. This could involve books, diaries, endless writing, comic books, or creating their own works like songs or stories, painting as well. They are quiet and they really know how to occupy themselves to avoid the chaos at home. These children don't cause problems. They are quiet and almost invisible. Often they have a passion for learning, but even if they don't, they spend long hours studying in their rooms. They stay silent and unnoticed. These kids escape into their own inner world of fantasy, knowledge, or learning. They create a safe space where they feel better and more comfortable. No matter what's happening around them, chaos, noise, shouting, difficult emotions, or tensions, they find solace in their own secure world. And okay, now focus. This is very important, what I'm gonna say right now. We often think that when we leave our family home, these survival strategies stay behind, and nothing could be further from the truth. We leave home with these active survival strategies, and we continue to use them in our adult life. We, as adults, live our family homes with active survival strategies and continue to use them in our adult lives. Did you escape into books as a child? Do you still seek refuge in something similar now? Were you always chatting, telling jokes, or comforting others as a child? And do you continue to do so? Maybe you were the one who saved the day, came up with solutions, and stepped up when your parents were struggling. If so, you are likely still doing these things today. Did you bring home big issues to divert attention from the core family problems? Do you still carry these difficult topics within you, allowing you to avoid facing the original pain? Our survival strategies stay with us throughout our lives. True adulthood begins when we start to recognize and analyze these strategies. They can be obstacles on our path to maturity. And actually, the key question isn't Where is my authenticity? Where is my adulthood? But rather, what has stood in my way to authenticity and what has blocked my path to adulthood? And it is really about looking at these obstacles, large and small, that block our way and gradually moving them aside. This allows us to finally step onto our true adult path and find our authenticity. Okay, and now, my dear listeners, I want to share with you the consequences of childhood over responsibility on adult life. These consequences form a certain foundation for us as we live our family homes, as children, and then as adults. But of course, this doesn't mean that these issues can't be rehabilitated. All of this can be worked on and can be changed and should be changed. And I know that this podcast might be an uncomfortable nudge or an awkward swallow, but I truly hope it motivates you to start a dialogue with yourself. Dialogue. Yeah, dialogue. Allow yourself to inspect your past and see how it was for you. The foundation of the consequences, what we naturally carry from our family homes into adulthood if we were over responsible children, continues into our adult lives. We really continue to take on a lot of responsibility as adults if we were responsible children. We take on many responsibilities, often not our own. We become adults who save, support, help, and constantly advise others. We have ideas for how others should live their lives. If we were over responsible children, we often place ourselves in the role of knowing everything, because as a children we had to know everything. This knowledge carries into adulthood, making it hard for us to accept that we might not knowing something. And the consequence of this is that we often feel the need to save others, to help everyone around us, or to spend a lot of time with our parents to make them feel better. Remember, over-responsible adults often find themselves in situations where they are needed, dealing with difficult circumstances, tragedies, and people in need of help. And the moment when we begin to step away from the role of the over-responsible child, we can start to see and move aside the obstacles that stand in the way of our true adulthood and authenticity. Suddenly, we start to wake up and realize, oh my god, I was in so many situations because I'm the rescuer, because I was always the one who everyone knew would step up, come up with solution, and save the day, That's it. Okay, another consequences of childhood over responsibility is the need for control. As adults, if we were over responsible children, we live with great deal of tension and control. Internally, we might feel like scared children, but externally, we present a facade of having everything under control. We, as adults who were once over-responsible children, are often hyper-vigilant and rigid. We frequently feel superior to our parents, feeling wiser and more competent because as children we often had to be more capable than our parents or display greater wisdom. This is crucial to address. You are your parents' child, and even if you couldn't fulfill that role properly as a child, you are still their child. And it is okay to let go of this over-responsibility and hyper-vigilance. And I'm gonna tell you about something personal, what I realized. So, when I started noticing that I subconsciously wanted to make sure my dad wasn't feeling sad, I knew I had to cut that off somewhere. Like, I began setting boundaries and becoming more individual. Even it wasn't comfortable at the beginning. And because something has changed, and like he didn't know what, but I knew that I have to becoming more adult, more individual. Honestly, I even recently moved back from Canada because I felt responsible for someone else's feelings. And yeah, but I realized that I need to focus on myself and live my adult life, not be an emotional support for someone else. Especially no more for any of my parents. Sometimes, you have to, but not just like it lasts forever. So, I just know that every of our parents, every adult, should at some point live with their new partner and build new life, even though it's not easy. But as adult children, we must consciously recognize and cut off from our parents' overbearing love. We really need to detach from our parents' love to build our own. And another consequence for adults who were over responsible children is a predisposition to depression and stress reactions. We carry a lot of retained childhood stress, and our emotional responses can feel stuck at the childhood level. We might feel utterly helpless in our adult lives, unable to take on any responsibility because we had too much of it as a children. This can lead to a deep sense of helplessness and inability to engage with life's obligations. We also may struggle with self regulation. We might go through life feeling lost, deeply depressed, highly stressed, and exhausted. This constant state of tension is leftover from our childhood. At the end of the day, we are still the little child who needs to take their place, who needs to rest and say, Mom, Dad, I am tired. And finally, if we were over responsible children, we may not want to have children ourselves because all these subconscious associations with heavy burdens from our own childhood experiences can make parenting seem overwhelming. And there is this internal thought: I have already been the parent to my mother, my father, and perhaps even my siblings. I don't want to any more children. I have already been responsible for someone. So, the consequences of being an over responsible child are numerous. You might avoid long term relationships or fear marriage because you are afraid you will have to take responsibility for your parents' emotions. But healthy relationship is a partnership, not taking responsibility for someone else's feelings. We tend to swing to two extremes. Either we continue being overly responsible, saving and supporting everyone, or we become helpless, lost, stressed, lacking self esteem, and unable to take responsibility for our own lives and finances as well. Because often parents subconsciously make us dependent on them, which can be damaging. We might struggle with commitments, but wake up and fight for ourselves when things get uncomfortable. Over responsible children, then adults of course, may completely avoid relationships because they associate them with burden and responsibility. And let's not even mention marriage. Such a commitment, so much responsibility and obligations. I don't want that. We often judge ourselves actually from the perspective of the mind, ego, and how do I say, dualism, questioning how we cannot want a long-term relationship or marriage. We want it in the future, of course. These are normal reactions to exceptionally difficult childhood circumstances. But when we connect the dots, we realize we are not abnormal. Our reactions make sense considering our past. Okay, so how do I recognize if I am a rescuer or not? So, how can you tell if you are a rescuer? How can you feel it? Of course, we can all stop and ask ourselves the question, how much do I help others? At what cost? To what extent do I support others? Am I more focused on my own life? Or am I maybe more focused on how I can help or advise my family or my parents today? How can I support them today? You know how to identify a rescuer? Firstly, a rescuer is deeply, deeply tired, even if nothing in their life should be causing such fatigue. This exhausting echoes continuously from childhood. Additionally, a rescuer is deeply, deeply angry. I want to say angry, but it's more than just that. It's rage. They are enraged at everything and everyone. These are people who help others but are angry at those they help. They are frustrated because others keep doing the same things that create problems. Rescuers are often mad at others for not waiting their help and would prefer to isolate themselves, often fearing new interactions because they worry another person will want something from them. These are two key traits of rescuers. They are tired and they are angry. And my friend who encounters such individuals in his work frequently discusses this. So, a rescuer is someone who is exhausted and enraged, fed up with their life. But beyond that, let me ask you a few questions. Stay with these questions and see what insights emerge. First, how many times a week do you talk to your parents? I won't even ask how many times a day, as I can't imagine someone talking multiple times a day with their parents, but if you do, it's a clear sign of over responsibility and an unhealthy closeness. If you are so intended with your parents, you might not have your own life, since becoming an adult means detaching from your parents and finding your own distance and identity and autonomy. So, how many times a week do you talk to your parents? Sit with that question for a moment. Next, consider whether you feel closer to any of your caregivers or to your current family that you have created with your spouse, partner, or children. Who do you feel closer to? If this is your parents, it means there is something unresolved, perhaps childhood wounds, or an attempt to get the love you didn't receive as you wished. It could be about over responsibility or rescuing, but there is always something there if you feel closer to your parents in adulthood than to your own family. Another important question is, who were you for your parents as a child, and who are you today? Were you their child, their son or daughter, or maybe you were a caretaker, someone who comforted them, hugged them in difficult times? Perhaps you were the mediator, the one relaying messages, or even a parental partner. Ask yourself who you are today in your relationship with your mom or with your dad. Ask yourself, does my parent know how to form a relationship with someone, or does he, she substitute the presence of a partner, husband, wife? For example, with my father, after his breakup, he subconsciously couldn't build a real relationship with anyone else, and there were always excuses. And my mom, she just goes with the flow. And ask yourself this: am I simply an adult daughter or son of my parents? Or am I still the one who constantly manages things, supports, rescues, advises, and takes responsibility? Do I possibly substitute a partner for my mom or dad? Who was I for my parents back then? And who am I for them today? If your answer is anything other than I was a daughter, son, and I'm a daughter son, then you might want to reflect on that. And lastly, consider this. How much space in your current adult life is occupied by matters concerning your caregivers? You can even draw a diagram and mark percentage-wise how much of your life is taken up by your parents' issues. This includes what happens between your parents, how one of them is doing, and what they need from you. Are we talking about over-responsibility? Absolutely. And these questions are for you to reflect on your own relationship with your parents and whether you might be taking on the role of a rescuer or caretaker. And I wanted to say that in the flow of love, it always goes one way. Parents give to their children, who then give to their own children, and so on. It's like a waterfall. Imagine waterfall. It can only flow in one direction, from top to bottom. So consider who gave to whom. Did your parents give to you or did you give to them? If we gave to our parents in any way, it always points to childhood responsibility. Okay, my listeners, thank you for listening to this episode. I'm really surprised that the first English episode was listened to twice as much as my solo ones in Polish on the very first day. So great, I'm glad to hear that. I will leave you with this reflection, and if you think it's worth it, please recommend it. Recommend this podcast to your friends or family. So thanks a lot and have a beautiful day. Bye!